Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to the online lecture on linear control systems theory. Today we are going to start the review of the course, and in this review will be carried out in 4 parts, and this is the first out of those 4 parts in which we will review the whole course of linear control systems. So we start with the fundamentals that we discussed at the beginning of the course. We started with the definition of a system because we are dealing with control systems or linear control systems in this course. So first and foremost, it is very important to understand what is the meaning of a system. So in our course, anything to which an input can be applied using actuators or any source of input, and in response to that input, an output can be observed. So this is our definition of a system: any entity to which you can apply an input. It could be a resistor to which you apply the voltage, and the output to that in response to that voltage could be the current flowing through the resistor. It could be a robot to which you apply torque through the motors, and the output could be the angle of the joints of the robot or the motion of the robot. So it could be anything, as long as you can define an input and output to an entity, you can call it a system. It could be as simple as a resistor and as complex as maybe an aircraft. Then a series or parallel combination or a feedback combination of multiple systems will also be a system, because a series combination of system will have its own input and output, and a parallel combination or similarly a feedback combination of the system will also have its own input and output. What is a control system? A control system is combination of at least 2 systems, one of which is a controller and the other is a plant. So controller in itself is a system and plant in itself is a system. When these two systems combine along with possibly other systems, then we formulate a control system. So in the role of the controller is to try to control the behavior of the plant or the output of the plant, and the plant is something which we wish to control using the controller. So plant is a system whose output is to be controlled or to be made to behave in a desirable manner. And what is a controller? Controller is a system that forces the using the actuators, the output of the plant to behave in a desirable manner. And then what is a linear system or a linear control system? A linear system or a linear control system is a system that obeys superposition principle. So all of these concepts are fundamentals to this course, and if these concepts are not clear in your mind, then the whole course will be weak. The concepts of your concepts regarding the whole course will be weak. So it is very important to firmly understand these concepts of what is a system, what is a control system, what is a plant, what is a controller, and what is a linear system. So what are the major types or configuration of the control system? First is the feed forward or open loop control. In open loop control, we have the desirable value of the output of the plant. So this is a plant and this is a controller. In general, this is a very generic diagram, and in general certain disturbances could be acting on the system. So this is disturbance D1, which is acting on the input or output of the controller, which is the input of the plant, and this is the external disturbance D2. So in the presence of disturbances, the goal is that using this desirable value of this R of S is desirable value of Y of S, which is the output of the plant. Actually in this case the output of the plant is V of S, and after applying the disturbance, external disturbance, what we get is Y of S. So here the challenge is to make this Y of S equal to R of S using the calculations inside the controller and using this input to the controller, which is basically not it is simple to do, but it is not robust against unknown disturbances and unknown uncertainties in the model of the plant. So feed forward control is not discussed thoroughly in this course. What we discuss in this course is the feedback control. In feedback control, there is the measurement of the output of the plant is fed back into the controller, and now the controller not only knows what is the desirable value of the output, but it also knows the actual value of the output, and the difference between actual and desirable value of the output gives the controller a better chance of determining the appropriate U of S that should be applied to the plant in order to achieve the desirable output from the plant. So there are many challenges involved in feedback control. Not all of them are discussed in this course. For example, throughout the course we ignore D1 and D2. We also ignore the noise in the sensor, and these type of disturbance analysis and noise analysis are discussed in the higher level classes in control systems. But ignoring these disturbances and noise is not very harmful, because feedback control is robust and it rejects disturbances by structure. Because if the disturbance is acting on the output of the plant and it changes the value of the output, then again the error will be generated and the controller will act and try to make the output equal to the desirable value of the output. So we also discussed in the beginning of the course that this feedback control is robust in nature and it also rejects disturbances. But of course it cannot reject disturbances if the disturbances are too large, and if the disturbances and noise occur at the same frequencies, then also there are problems which are discussed in the higher level courses in control systems, or postgraduate level or graduate level courses in the control systems. So key points in feedback control, we have from this diagram we calculated at the beginning of the course, we calculated this transfer function where y of s is this expression times r of s plus this expression times d of s, another expression times d2 of s, and minus this expression times n of s. So these expressions also give us some information. For example, we discussed that if the control gain is high enough, then this factor and this factor will go to 0, and in the absence of noise y of s will become r of s. That was the disturbance rejection discussion. And then we discussed we briefly discussed the sensitivity of the system, which is 1 over 1 plus g of s c of s, and sensitivity is the measure of how much effect the disturbances will have on the output of the plant, and lower the sensitivity, lower the effect of disturbances on the output of the plant. And then there is complementary sensitivity, which is related to the noise of the sensors. Higher the complementary sensitivity, higher the effect of noise on the sensors. So we want low complementary sensitivity and low sensitivity. Low sensitivity to avoid the effect of disturbances on the plant, and low complementary sensitivity to avoid the effect of noise on the sensor value. But unfortunately there is a fundamental trade-off or limitation in feedback control, and that limitation is that s plus t is always equal to 1, which means that you cannot have both s and t simultaneously equal to 0. What you do is that you design the controller such that disturbances are rejected at some frequencies, and at some other frequencies noise is rejected by selecting low value of complementary sensitivity. The discussion and design with respect to disturbance rejection and noise rejection at different frequencies, it it is basically taken up at the graduate level class in control systems, but here at least we should know about this fundamental trade-off in control systems, so that when we are practically working on projects, we should be aware that we cannot have a noisy sensor in the projects where there is a presence of disturbance, or where there is a presence of non-trivial disturbance in the system. And when there are when the disturbances are absent, or there are very little disturbances acting on the system, then we can afford the noisy sensors or cheap sensors, or low price sensors. So for example, if you are trying to design a control system for an aircraft, then aircraft has to experience a lot of crosswinds and other disturbances from when it is flying in the air. So in that case, you will not want to have noisy sensors on board the aircraft in order for your controller to work well. And on the other hand, if you are working on some system, for example, a robotic arm where the joint is acting or just doing limited manipulations, and there are no disturbances acting on the arm, then you can have a cheap or low price sensor to measure the angle, and you can but if that arm is doing something really important, for example placing some expensive equipment in the prescribed slots, then you have to use precise sensors. But if the objective of your project is not does not require very precise movements, then you can use cheap or low price sensors. So in this course we mostly dealt with this diagram, which is very simplified diagram in which we ignore the dynamics of the sensor. We assume ideal sensor, and we ignore the noise in the sensor, we ignore the disturbances, and these simplifications are not too bad because the feedback control is robust by nature and by structure. So despite all these assumptions of zero disturbance and zero noise and ideal sensor, the feedback control works reasonably well in professional projects, in a lot of professional projects, not all of them. Okay, so this type of feedback diagram has associated closed loop transfer function given by C of s into G of s over 1 plus C of s into G of s. This is very common expression that is used again and again in this course. And then if C of s into G of s is some function like some numerator and some denominator, then you can always write the closed loop system. This is the shortcut of writing closed loop system just by looking at the open loop transfer function. So if you look at the open loop transfer function, you can write the closed loop transfer function straight away using this formula: denominator polynomial plus numerator polynomial in the denominator of closed loop transfer function, and in the numerator remains the same. So closing the loop does not change the numerator. And in the later part of the course, you already know that when you apply feedback control, the zeros remain the same in open loop and closed loop system, only the poles change. And then we study root locus technique and other techniques to track the closed loop pole locations that will come in the later parts of the review of this course. So modeling of next is the modeling of the linear time invariant control systems. For modeling, we basically use three major tools. First tool that we use to model linear time invariant control system is differential equations. This is the ordinary nth order differential equation, ordinary differential equation. And you can see that on the left hand side there are derivatives of the output, and on the right hand side there are derivatives of the input. And for causality, it is assumed that m is less than the value of n. So transfer function is you can create transfer function directly from the differential equation. You can see here that the coefficients a1, a2, an minus 1, an, they come in the denominator of the transfer function, and the derivatives become powers of s. So this nth derivative of y becomes s raised to the power n, and this n minus 1 derivative of y becomes s to the power n minus 1, and similarly mth derivative of the input becomes s raised to the power m. And this is all possible because we assume zero initial conditions. If we do not assume zero initial conditions means that at time t equals 0, the output, the input, and all the higher derivatives of the output and the input all are 0. So the system starts at complete rest and from the origin or 0 position in the beginning. So under that assumption, you can convert the differential equation into this type of transfer function. Then there is a state space model. You can convert the transfer function directly into state space. You can see here that the denominator coefficients an comes down in the last row of the system matrix minus an, then an minus 1 comes with the negative sign here, and so on. There is minus a2 and up to so on minus a1, and the other part of the matrix is all zeros except that above the main diagonal, this is the main diagonal of the matrix, and above the main diagonal there are all ones, and all other entries in the matrix are 0. In the B matrix, the input matrix, all the entries are 0 except there is 1 at the last entry, and the coefficients b0, b1, b2 up to so on bm, they appear in the reverse order in the C matrix of the state space representation. So since m is less than n, the difference between m and n is expressed as zeros. These are zeros that we fill into the C matrix when the highest power m here is less than n minus 1. If it is equal to n minus 1, if m is equal to n minus 1, then there is no need for zeros here. Bm up to so on b0 will fill up the whole C matrix. So you can convert state space back into transfer function using this matrix multiplication, C into Si minus A inverse into B. I is the identity matrix of the same size as A. This is A matrix, this is B matrix, this is C matrix, and so these are the three ways to model the LTI systems. This was our second topic after discussing the feedback configuration in control systems course. So here is an example. So you have a third order system where you have this output derivatives on the left hand side and input derivatives on the right hand side. You can convert this into transfer function by just, here is the coefficient 3, the s y triple dot becomes s cube, and 3y double dot becomes 3s square, 9y dot becomes 9s, 4y becomes 4, 2u double dot becomes 2s square in the numerator, u dot becomes s, and minus u becomes minus 1. And similarly you can write down the state space, all zeros, ones above the main diagonal, and this 4 comes here as minus 4, this 9 comes here as minus 9, this 3 comes here as minus 3, and similarly this is all zeros and the last entry is 1, and finally the C matrix will be this minus 1 comes as it is in the first entry, this 1, the coefficient of s is 1 here, it comes at the second place, the coefficient of s square becomes at the third place. There is no need to fill in extra zeros here because the highest derivative of u is 1 less than highest derivative of y. If the highest derivative of u would be only u dot, 2 less than the derivative of y, then we would need to fill in 1 0 in the C matrix. So this is an example of converting the representation or model of a system from one form to. So next we have linearization of nonlinear systems. There were 5 steps in linearization of nonlinear systems. Step 1 is to write the system in state space form. Step 2 is find all the equilibrium points. Step 3 is to calculate the Jacobian matrix. Step 4 is to evaluate the Jacobian matrix at each equilibrium point. And step 5 is to write the state space equation using the Jacobian at each equilibrium point. So these were the 5 steps that we discussed in this course for linearization of or developing linear approximation of nonlinear systems. So as a result, as we develop as many linear approximation of a nonlinear system as there are number of equilibrium points. So for each equilibrium point there is a corresponding linear approximation for the nonlinear system. And the question here is that the dynamics of the linear approximation are applicable only in the close vicinity or neighborhood of the corresponding equilibrium point. So if the equilibrium point is 0, or if the equilibrium point is the origin, then the linear approximation of the using the origin as the equilibrium point is only valid if the state values or the values of the state variables are small enough, and we do not know exactly how big is this neighborhood. So there are other methods that one can use to approximate the size of the neighborhood under which the linear approximation is valid, but usually we determine this based on our practical experience and the performance of the project that we are working on. Then there is an example of linearization. Suppose you have a nonlinear system y double dot plus 3y dot square plus cos of y is equal to 2u. So here this is a nonlinear term and this is a nonlinear term. So this system is a nonlinear system. So step 1 is to write the system in state space equation. We define x1 to be equal to y and x2 to be equal to x1 dot, and then this will give us x2 dot equal this equation. We have already done this, so I have not I'm not going to go into the details of this. This equation comes straight from this equation by substituting y double dot as x2 dot, because x2 is equal to y dot. So we have a nonlinear system in the state space form. Then we determine the equilibrium points. The way to determine the equilibrium points is by simultaneously equating all the derivatives of the states equal to 0. So if we equate x1 dot equals 0, then the equilibrium point value of x2 is equal to becomes 0. So if this becomes 0, then that means x2 is 0 at equilibrium point. And if we put x2 dot equals 0, this gives us cosine of x1 equal to 2u. So remember that in linearization of controlled systems, we said that we should also specify the equilibrium point value of the control input as well. So here I select the equilibrium point value of u, which is u star, which is I select this equal to 1 by 2, and when I put u star equal 1 by 2, then I get equilibrium point value of x1 to be 0, 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi and so on. So in this case, because 0 and 2 pi are same angle, so for practical purposes we take x1 star to be 0. So the equilibrium point of the system is x1 equals 0 and x2 equal to 0. And you can verify this by putting x1 and x2 equal to 0 in these two equations, and both of these derivatives should simultaneously become 0 by putting the equilibrium point value into these equations. Then this equilibrium point has been obtained at u star equal 1 by 2. If I change the value of u star, then probably the equilibrium point will also change. So you have to remember this. In controlled systems, the equilibrium point depends upon the equilibrium point value of the control input as well. Okay, so this we have done step number 2. So we go on to step number 3. So far we have written down the system in state space equation, and we have found the equilibrium points. Next we calculate the Jacobian, which is partial f by partial x. F is the vector of right hand side of the right hand side of the derivatives of the state variables. So in this case, f of x will be first component will be x2, and this is the second component of f of x. And so if you take partial derivative, then you take partial derivative of the first component of f with respect to first state variable, and then first component of the f with respect to second state variable. Then in the next row you take the second component of f, take derivative with respect to first state variable. To take the second component of f, take derivative with respect to second state variable, and then this becomes the Jacobian matrix. And so the first element of f, which is f1, this is x2. The derivative of x2 with respect to x1 will be 0, and derivative of x2 with respect to x2 itself will be 1. And similarly, the derivative of this whole thing with respect to x1 will be plus sine of x1, and the derivative of this whole expression with respect to x2 will be minus 6x2. Similarly, there is Jacobian of with respect to control. So that will be partial f1 by partial u and partial f2 by partial u, because u is a scalar quantity, so there is only one column in the B Jacobian matrix. So f1 is x2, there is no u here. Derivative with respect to u of x2 is 0, and derivative with respect to u of this whole quantity is 2. So here we have calculated the Jacobian matrices. Step 3 is complete. Next we move on to the step 4, which is evaluate the Jacobian matrix at x equal x star and u equal u star. If we put x equal x star and u equal u star in this matrix, then x1 star is 0, sine of 0 is 0, and x2 star is also 0, so here will be 0. So this is Jacobian evaluated at the equilibrium point value, and this is the control Jacobian evaluated at the equilibrium point value. And then the final step is to write the equations of linear approximation, and here we write these equations. Delta x dot is equal to A matrix. This is the A matrix of linear approximation, and this is the B matrix of linear approximation, and this is the output of the linear approximation. And notice that this delta x is basically x minus x star. So in this case x star is 0, so delta x will be equal to x, and similarly delta u is u minus u star. So in this case delta u will be u minus 1 by 2. So whenever delta u is 0, that means u is equal to 1 by 2. Alright, so this is the topic of linearization or linear approximation of nonlinear systems that we covered in this course. And this is important because in professional projects there are many nonlinear systems that you might be dealing with. So in order to deal with those systems, first you linearize or find the linear approximation at the equilibrium point that is suitable for practical application of the project, and then you apply or design the control on that system. Then the next topic that we discussed in this course is Mason's rule. Mason's rule is the topic that we discuss in order to find the transfer function in complex block diagrams in industrial process. Alright, so the formula for finding the transfer function of a complex block diagram is you calculate all the direct paths from the input to the output, and you calculate all the deltas and delta i's, and the formula for transfer function is direct path I into delta I plus sum of all the direct paths into corresponding deltas divided by the delta of the whole block diagram. Actually in Mason rule you convert the block diagram into signal flow graph, and then you find the transfer function or direct paths. So dpi is the transfer function of the ith direct path from R to Y, and delta is 1 minus sum of all loop gains plus sum of gain products of all pairs of non-touching loops minus sum of gain products of all triples of non-touching loops plus sum of gain products of all quadruples of non-touching loops minus up to so on. So if there are non-touching loops in the diagram, then the delta expression will have all possible gain products of the pairs, triples, quadruples, and so on, and the sign will toggle. So here is a minus sign, then plus sign, then again minus sign, then again plus sign, and then again a minus sign, and so on. And then delta I is same as delta, but with gains of all the loops touching ith direct path being dropped. So this we have already discussed, but I will review an example of application of Mason rule so that you get a good reminder about how to apply the Mason rule. For example, let us suppose that we have a block diagram for which we have developed the signal flow graph. So this is the signal flow graph of suppose an industrial process in which there are different systems connected in series, and there are different combinations, feed forward and feedback combinations involved in the industrial process, and this is the input of the process and this is the output of the process. So we wish to find the transfer function. First we start calculating the direct paths. So you can see that there is an obvious direct path from R to Y, and this direct path is G1, G2, G3, G4 and G5. So the transfer function of this direct path is G1, G2, G3, G4, G5. Then we have another direct path which is from here, from the third node we jump and we come back at the fifth node and go straight to the Y. This is another direct path, and the transfer function of this direct path is G1, G2, G3, this direct path transfer function is G1, G6, G4 and G5. Okay, then there is a third direct path where we jump from the fourth node and come back at seventh node, and then the transfer function of this direct path 3 is G1, G2, G7. So there are three direct paths in this diagram, and we have identified all the three direct paths and the transfer functions of these direct paths. Next we identify the loops. First and the most obvious loop is this loop, and the transfer function of this loop is minus G4 H1. So H1 is negative, so minus G4 H1 is the transfer function of this loop. Second loop is this one. So this is the second loop. The transfer function of this loop is G2, G3, G4, G5, H2 with negative sign. So this is the transfer function of loop, the second loop. And then there is a third loop which goes from G6 to G4, G5 and comes back at this third node again. And the transfer function of this third loop is minus G4, G5, G6 and H2. So there are three loops and three direct paths in this flow graph, and once we have identified the flow, the loops and the direct paths, then we look at which loops are touching which direct paths and which loops are touching or non-touching with respect to each other. But before that we we identify a fourth loop here, which is G2, G7 and H2. So this is the fourth loop in the system, and you can see here that L1 and L4 are basically non-touching loops. All other loops, so the concept of touching and non-touching is dependent upon the nodes. So you can see that if I put numbers into these nodes, this is node number 1, node 2, node 3, node 4, node 5, node 6, node 7 and node 8. So there are 8 nodes in this graph, and the decision of whether a loop is touching with respect to another loop or not, we make that decision based on common nodes. If there is even one node common in both the loops, then we say that the loops are touching with respect to each other. If there is no node common in the loops, for example in loop L4 there is node number 3, 4 and there is node number 7. So 3, 4 and 7 nodes are involved in L4, and for in L1 5 and 6 are involved. So node number 5 and 6 are involved. So there is no common node in L1 and L4. On the other hand, every other loop has common nodes with each other. So all other loops are touching each other, but L1 and L4 are non-touching. So if we were to apply the Mason rule, then delta will be 1 minus sum of all loop gains plus sum of gain products of all pairs of non-touching loops. In this case there is only one pair of non-touching loops, so in this expression there will be only one term. Then delta 1 and delta 2, all the loops are basically touching direct path 1 and direct path 2. So delta 1 and delta 2 are equal to 1, because delta 1 is the same as delta, but the loop gains of all the loops touching direct path 1 will be dropped. In this case all 4 loops are touching direct path 1, so we will drop all the gains of the 4 loops. So after dropping all the gains, all we are left with is this 1. So delta 1 is 1. Similarly delta 2 is 1, because all the loops are touching direct path 2. But in direct path 3, L1 is not touching direct path 3. So if we drop the gains of L2, L3 and L4 from the delta, so here L4 will become 0. So this product will become 0. So what we will remain with is 1 minus L1. So this is the expression for delta 3, and in this way we find out the transfer function direct path 1 into delta 1 plus direct path 2 into delta 2 plus direct path 3 into delta 3 divided by the delta of the whole block signal flow graph. So this is the transfer function of the industrial process for which we had sketched the signal flow graph, and this was the example of application of Mason's rule on a combination of systems. And that's the end of part 1 of the review of linear control systems course. We shall be having total 4 parts, so 3 more parts to come, and in this part we have basically revised about 25% of the course, and the remaining 75% of the course we shall revise in the upcoming 3 parts of this course review lecture. But before I conclude, I will briefly revise the lecture that we have discussed today in a couple of minutes, so that you have a quick review of what we have discussed in this lecture. So we started with the review of fundamentals. We looked at the definition of a system, anything that has input and output, and the definition of a control systems, what is a plant, what is a controller, and what is a linear control system, anything that obeys superposition principle. And superposition principle is composed of additivity and homogeneity. So major types of control configurations: open loop control and feedback control. We don't discuss open loop control much in this course because it is simple, but on the other hand it also cannot cater for unknown disturbances and modeling uncertainties. So the key points in feedback control, that we have this fundamental trade-off between sensor noise and disturbance rejection. So what we do is usually disturbance is at low frequencies and the noise occurs at high frequencies, and so we design the controller in such a way that we keep the sensitivity value low at low frequencies, and we keep the complementary sensitivity value to a low value at high frequencies. So then there is the transfer function of a simplified block diagram that is used a lot of times in this course. So at this level I would like all the students to be comfortable with converting this open loop transfer function without having to take the LCM and so on. Just convert straight away into the closed loop transfer function, and recognize that by closing the loop, numerator remains the same, only denominator changes. Then we discussed the modeling of LTI systems, differential equation, transfer function and state space. Remember that the state space representation of LTI system is not unique. This particular state space representation is known as controllable canonical form, and in this case we have all the states are the output and the derivatives of the output. So first state is the output itself. Well, not exactly in this case, but in this case the states are the output is basically a linear combination of state variables, but if the numerator side is 0 or numerator side is have a simple u on the right hand side, then we can have y is equal to x1. But in this case y is equal to bm times x1 plus bm minus 1 times x2 up to so on b naught times xm plus 1, and all others are 0. So you can also convert state space back into transfer function. Then we looked at an example where we have a system, we convert it into from differential equation to state space. We can convert differential equation to transfer function and transfer function to state space. We can convert it back as well, but if the state space is not given in this form, then we have to use the matrix multiplication of this matrix multiplication. If the state space of the system is not given in controllable canonical form, then in order to find the transfer function from the state space, you have to use this formula. Then we looked at linearization of nonlinear system. There are 5 steps. You write down the system in state space, you find the equilibrium points, calculate the Jacobian, evaluate the Jacobian, then you write the state space equation using Jacobian at each equilibrium point, as many linear approximation as the number of equilibrium points, and the dynamics of the linear approximation are applicable only in the vicinity or neighborhood of the corresponding equilibrium point. So there we looked at an example of second order system where we write down the system in state space form. We found the equilibrium point, then we calculated the Jacobian, then we evaluated the Jacobian at the equilibrium point, and then we wrote the corresponding linear approximation, and then we revised the Mason's rule. And Mason rule is basically used to find the transfer function of complex block diagrams that might be you can see those type of block diagrams in industrial process systems. Then we looked at an example of Mason rule. We identify all the direct paths, and then we identify all the loops, and then we identify which loops are non-touching, and then we start to calculate. First we calculate the delta, and then we calculate delta 1, delta 2 and delta 3, and then we write down the transfer function of the input and output of the flow graph. Okay, so this was the lecture, and hopefully you were able to understand most of it at least, and if something is unclear or needs more clarification, please leave some comments so that I can clarify those concepts. Thank you for listening.